The most important contribution which they made to the development of the city-state was the Codification of Law. In the days when the laws were unwritten, it was to the obvious advantage of the nobles to twist to their own interest the laws, which, though not revealed by the gods, were under their protection, therefore deserving of great respect. The law codes were under the protection of the gods. In time, the people protested against this custom and insisted that the laws also be inscribed. The earliest codes of which we have any knowledge are not elaborate and tend to be harsh. Here's an interesting point about early laws. They are associated with the names of lawgivers, persons chosen to arbitrate between conflicting interests and entrusted with the task of ordering and writing down the laws. Of great importance is the fact that the penalties were determined not by the judges, but by the law itself. I mean, that is the exact role of a judge in a modern court. We have the law, we have the penalty prescribed for the law, and we have the judge who allots the penalty and determines guilt or innocence. Back then, he just determined guilt or innocence. The penalty was already prescribed. Ready-made rough justice. They had to start somewhere. Rough times. There was a statute that made it death by hanging to propose a change in an existing law if you didn't succeed. So you better be damned sure you better know that when you propose to change a law, everyone's going to agree, or enough are going to agree to change it. Because if it doesn't change, you are dead. They didn't want people messing with their laws, did they? Here we can see the Greek dread of revolution. The drastic nature of the law, however, tended to freeze the status quo. Zeleucus' provision of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is probably historical. That's a code that they found in Greek law, and he says, quote, "It is unique in Greek law and reflects Eastern influence. On the whole, Greek law was more humane than Semitic law." We can make out from the beginning a vague desire for self-help, which eventually became a determination that the will of the community should be superior to special interests, whether they belong to individual, family, or clan. So they came to say there's something society and special interests shouldn't be able to hijack the law, shouldn't be able to hijack the state. Special interests shouldn't be able to use force. Yeah, whether they belong to individual, family, or clan. The end aimed at was to regulate the whole public and private life. Under the aristocracies, then, was created the sovereign law of the city-state, the idea that law should be supreme over men. There was, however, no written constitution. Here is what this culminates in. The constitution might change overnight with a change in party, but the body of civil law remained. It's bizarre and odd. It's like all the traffic laws and all that stuff stays in effect. It's just a new government. And people just go about their business and the laws all stay in effect. Probably better enforcement, worse enforcement, higher taxes, whatever. Who knows what the things are. But the idea of governments just changing and changing, and that there was a code, civil law code, that was there and was regular and strict, that could be, relied upon. Interesting. The Greek looked upon the city-state as normal. It afforded him liberty and generally protection. Here he could trade. Here he found the apparatus of government, magistrates, boards, codified law. Here, too, he could take some part in government, for whether it was oligarchy or democracy, he was not allowed to delegate his functions. So not only is it you have the option or the right or the opportunity to take part in government, but you do not have the option to turn it down. If you are supposed to do this or that, be a voter or whatever, you're there. You have to do it. This is like mandatory voting laws in a cultural extreme. By the 7th century, there were many city-states in Thessaly, central Greece, the Peloponnesus, the Aegean Islands, Asia Minor, and, after the pattern of the mother cities, in the newer colonies of the West. It should be emphasized that though the state was small, a city might extend its citizenship to an entire valley, the inhabitants of which would then look upon themselves not as citizens of this or that hamlet, deme, D-E-M-E, but of the chief city in the region, right? This was known as Sympolitiae, S-Y-M-P-O-L-I-T-E-I-A. Similarly, a group of villages might be abandoned in favor of a new central city. This was called Synoximos, S-Y-N-O-I-K-I-S-M-O-S. In spite of the obvious advantages of the city-state, however, many villages continued to exist in Greece. Especially after the advent of city-states, I would imagine it would become a little bit safer for the remaining villages, wouldn't it? The city-state then was the driving force in the development of Greece. Not least among its achievements was the period of colonization, which inaugurated shortly after 750 BC. Now, we got to know the colonization a bit in the Star book, History of the Ancient World. We got some of the colonization, but I thought that was not sufficient treatment. So we've got a bit more here now in Chapter 5, Colonial Expansion and the Rise of Tyranny. And we get to look a little bit more about that whole situation and understand it in just a bit more depth. The 2 centuries after 750 BC are among the most interesting in the world's history. Our information concerning this period approaches reasonable adequacy, so that in spite of many problems, Greece for the first time takes on real flesh and blood. The closer we get, the better it's going to get. We're going to get to better and better material. Greek world, it will be recalled, was now ruled by aristocrats, not kings or despots. Permanency was in the air. The kingship had been done away with. Now, it's an interesting part. Yet, in another century, the aristocracies have gone and tyrants rule in their stead. So kings are gone, aristocracies rule. Aristocracies are overthrown, tyrants rule. Another century will witness the beginning of democracy. Then tyrants are overthrown and democracy rules. Meanwhile, the Greek people have embarked on a second phase of colonial expansion and dot the Mediterranean and Black Sea with their new settlements. The invention of coinage, the rise of industry, stimulating ideas from the East, alter the scene. A veritable renaissance in literature and art occurs, but violence, class hatred, and poverty are not absent. But isn't that interesting? No more kings. We just have a ruling aristocracy now. No more aristocracy. Back to some sort of king, a tyrant, but a different sort of king, the people's king. Then, get him out of there, the people rule, democracy, government of the people. Did industry and trade cause colonization, or was it simply the need for more land that sent Greeks across the sea? What caused colonization? Why did they go do that? We may start with the proposition that as a rule men do not willingly leave home, and if the land for which they are headed is unknown, perhaps it is a wilderness or inhabited by unfriendly natives, then it becomes clear that the motivating force must have been especially strong. Discontent of some sort is present. Why is a motivating factor necessarily discontent? We have already noted that there was much poverty during the Greek Middle Age. The nobles succeeded to the king's power, the rich became richer, the poor became poorer, my God, and many of the small farmers were reduced to slavery or serfdom. Marxism. Now then, Hesiod of Acra has left us, about from 750 BC, about his time period, has left us a picture of contemporary conditions. In his Works and Days, he complains bitterly against the greedy nobles who have seized the best land while the poor farmers must be content with a stony, barren soil. Now it's got, this is a poem, and they just translate it into prose for us here, and I'll read a bit of it because it's interesting. I struck